All right.
Yeah.
Good morning, everybody. Today is November 10th. It is 10:03 a.m. I'm calling the Texas State Board of Examiners of Psychologists into session. I'll start with actually, Ms. Moore, do you want to call the roll for us?
Sure, I can do that.
Thank you.
Mr. Adler,
Present.
Dr. Becker,
Present.
all right, Mr. Bridges, Ryan,
Present.
Dr. Calhoun, Dr. Cartwright,
Present.
Dr. Landon,
Present.
Dr. Singh,
Present.
Mr. Zagaris.
Here.
All right.
Present.
All right.
Very good.
We have a quorum.
Thank you very much. We are going to jump straight into public comment. Public's limited to 3 minutes. And Patrick, Brenda, are you keeping time?
Yes, sir.
All right, and Ms. Skiff has a timer. Will you be giving an audible 1 minute, or should people be able to see that?
There is a little ding that goes last minute.
Okay, very good. Then we'll jump into public comment. And I believe, do we use the raise hand feature to signal that that you'd like to give comment?
Yes.
All right, so if you will raise your hand, use the raise hand feature, and we will get to you.
Okay. So our first one we have is Mrs. Gertrudes. 1 second.
Hi, my name is
Hello there.
Grothews. Thank you for having me again today. We just want to make comments. I'm representing Texas Psychological Association. And on your agenda, you will be talking about ASPP tests, the EPPP 1 and 2 and adoption. And of course, you know, there's some great concerns about the EPPP 2 and the bias and against especially people of color and minorities. So we want to make sure that we're doing due diligence and looking at the appropriateness of adopting this test. I know we have some time. We're going to continue to look at what other states and other researchers are finding about the test. We definitely do want to have a clinical portion of this exam as a gatekeeping method for competency, but we want to make sure that it's a fair and equitable test as well. So thank you for being very cautious about this adoption and getting information prior to making it a requirement.
Thank you, Dr. Grothews.
Thank you.
Mr. Belimowicz, Zoom is having a time lag, so I'll keep track. I'll still keep doing it, but I'll manually let people know.
Okay, very good.
There are no more hands raised. We do have one caller. I'll check to see if they want to make a public comment. Caller, would you like to make a public comment to the board?
Caller at *6 to unmute yourself if you want to make public comment.
Okay, seeing no response. There are no more public comments.
All right.
Okay.
Thank you, Dr. Grothews, for your public comment. And so I'll go on to the chair's report. We'll talk about the EPPP 2. That's kind of part of what I have to talk about. I'll update you guys. I went to the ASPPB annual meeting, National Harbor, Maryland, a couple weeks ago, and it was my first time up there to the ASPPB meeting. I've been up in our nation's capital before, but it was good. I enjoyed my time up there. I was able to speak as well. I spoke about the kind of the balance between workforce demands and relaxing standards, which is an interesting concept. I can see how the two can interplay off of each other, but they're not necessarily one or the other, which is part of what we talked about. And my approach to it, I'll share with you guys, is really about balancing the why of what, when we set up any type of rule. It is a barrier. Why is it there? And what good is it doing? In many cases, it's great. In other cases, things need to be tweaked. And I kind of just explain some of the things we're doing in Texas and asking why, especially on the heels of our special meeting that we did over the summer. We talked a little bit about our approach to what we're doing with school psychologists and asking, what are the qualifications for that and why, and how we think we're going to move the ball on expanding access to mental health services for school kids. So that's the update there. I'm happy to talk about that. If anyone has any questions, happy to talk about that. We can talk more about EPPP2. That was probably, in my opinion, the biggest thing that came out of the meeting. I was informed of the decision by SPPB to make EPPP2 mandatory this at the same time that the email went out. And obviously there's a lot to be discussed and hashed out about the merits of if that's a good idea, bad idea. But we were all told essentially all together as the email went out. So we can we'll get into that under the board administrators report and probably have a chance to talk about that. But that's really all I have from the chair's report. So with that, we're going to move on into the board administrators report.
Okay. All right. So for the council, in your packets there are the fourth quarter and annual reports. And they're there for informational purposes. Under side pack, there are now 33 states that are under the side pack. And for as far as Texas licensees, there's 715 under the ATIP and 46 under the TAP that's able to participate in all those states as well. SciPac has rolled out a new reporting for a compliance report that they'll start doing quarterly. And that item is in your packet as well for you to look at. So we'll start seeing quarterly compliance report through SciPac. And then under the ASPPB, as you know, they announced that the EPPP will be one exam with 2 parts. So, and they're suggesting that will roll out in January 2026. So we can open that up for discussion at this time.
So I'll just begin by laying this out, and then I'm going to turn it over to the members here to chime in. Like I mentioned, the letter that went out while we were being told in the session there, and there's a lot of, I don't know, arguments for how it's going to work and why. The thing that I struggle with is that we're 50, ASPPB is 50 states, provinces of Canada, some other territorial jurisdictions. The idea of a one-size-fits-all, approach for all of us to be able to adopt this thing, that's a not an insignificant legislative or rulemaking lift, because all 50 states, our rules work very differently. The argument was made that because it's not really optional anymore, they're just saying it's still the same test, it's just in 2 parts, so you should fit your statutes. We're not sure about that. The second part of it too is that the cost. If it's just simply the same test, my understanding is still going to cost significantly more. That's a concern that I have. And then there's obviously one of the big themes actually of the whole conference, was no more business as usual. Part of the discussion was making sure how are we inclusive? How do our rules affect minority populations? And I mean, there's a lot of evidence out there and a lot of discussion around how occupational licensing in general negatively affects minority and immigrant populations. So adding another barrier here with significant cost, I'm asking myself the question, what are we solving and what is the negative impact of this, positive and negative impact? So those are my questions. I'm sure you guys have questions of this and questions of each other and thoughts. So I will turn the floor over to the board for your thoughts.
John, we have a case today where we're looking at a growth plan where the lady, I forget her name, who is having difficulty passing the test, and her diagnosis, she blatantly states, is test anxiety. How many of those qualified people that are having a deserved disability are the ones that are going to be excluded by having more testing? That already exists today without the addition of the extra test. That's one point. The second point has been brought up several times in our previous discussions, that the schools educating the students are the ones that are supposed to take care of part 2.
And I believe we've got some comment from some written public comment from schools with concerns about the EVV2 as well. What other thoughts, concerns?
Do we know how much more the cost is going to be?
$450,
Okay, and that's
$450?
that's as it is today, correct?
correct.
And there's no, that number, I mean, that's not set in stone, I imagine. I imagine with inflation and anything, that number can change, correct?
Yeah, it can change, yeah. And we don't set it, ASPPB sets that. It's 600 for the part 1, or what you all know as the EPPP. And then part 2 would be an additional $450. The timing, yeah, the timing of the timing of when you take the test will change. Under this, the part 1 would be taken. I think it's after the internship. Maybe it's before. It be taken in your doctoral program, which I got to say, that's a good thing, I think. And I would, one of the benefits is it offloads I'm hoping it will offload the exam approval process from us and shift it over to ASPPB, which that's something I've been trying to get for a while now, and I have not been successful in being able to do that. But it's got some baggage with it, as you guys can see. I'll be honest with you. I'm gonna push y'all. I want to hear y'all debate it. I need to hear y'all debate this thing today, because I really need some help understanding.
So here are my limited understanding of the issues, because I don't know all of them and I need a little bit more time to sort through all of it. But there are a couple of points that have been made to me, and I still need to do some more research about this personally. But the first is that a 2-part exam actually requires an overhaul of pretty much the entire doctoral education system, which the entire doctoral education system hasn't bought into yet and hasn't engaged in yet. Because what you're talking about is changing exactly what you said, Daryl, which is the timing of the tests. So that's not just on licensing boards, that's on the doctoral programs. So that is a shift educationally that requires engagement, which you may or may not have everywhere across the board. And educationally, what do you do with people that are already there? At what point do you implement this? That is a stepwise process that educators have to be involved in. And so it's not being done, this is being done in a very voluntold kind of way. And it's really being strong-armed. The data isn't very clear about the clinical utility. What, to John's point about, why do this? That has been the biggest question from the very beginning. It was about a lot of the criticism of the EPPP1 is that it is very textbook based. And so a lot of people take that exam and then they filter out the information because they don't use it again, but it's supposed to be a licensing exam. So the question of, could the exam be more clinically viable if it's based on doing clinical work? And so that was what the exam always was, but the actual data is questionable in its validity, or it has been questioned and there hasn't been a ton of data that has been put out, or folks have asked questions about the data. The biggest one being about, is there a disparity in diverse applicants who take these exams and study and look at these exams? And then the cost question, and you're the first person who's given me a clear answer about what it's going to cost to take that second part of the exam. And does that put a bigger burden? And it does. I mean, $1,000 on top of everything else that students are being asked to do. So those are the really sort of high level points, but I think still being asked that whole education engagement question is a really big one, because I don't know how schools and how programs are going to adopt this super fast.
And I'll say this, Dr. Becker, to your point about how schools have to have the buy-in on this. Daryl or somebody correct me if I'm wrong here, but my feeling from being at ASPPB, it was not made up of largely university educating type people. It was made up of professionals, largely, from all different, walks of the profession. And the idea also about it being kind of voluntold, that my feeling of being up there, this is probably the most consequential thing I think that came out of the meeting, and the fact that it was just the board that voted on it and it wasn't discussed among the members really. Again, this is my first time up there, so I tried to listen a lot more than I spoke, but it didn't feel like there was a whole lot of discussion among the body in making this decision.
One of the questions that I had, is what negative occurred after we took away the oral exam? I mean, what were the repercussions of that? It doesn't really seem like, again, like I think it's that why question that kind of gets me a little bit, like, why are we all of a sudden implementing this again? And I don't know, like I'd like to see some data on like pre and post taking the oral exam away, if that really changed like the amount of licensure for LPs or LPAs, in the state. But again, that why question is kind of what sticks with me.
Let me talk to that, because it might be helpful to kind of understand how we got to the EPPP, because I know a lot of you were not on the board when this journey began a long time ago. Remember, we used to have the oral exam, and in 2017 we did away with the oral exam. But part of the discussions in doing away with the oral exam during our sunset review was we wanted to make sure we had some sort of competency exam to take its place, since we were losing that. Sunset did not like the oral exam because of the subjectivity involved. So they wanted a more objective, validated form of exam. They left us the authority to adopt that kind of an exam. And ASPPB was in the process of developing part 2. And so we thought, oh, that's going to be the fit that will go in here. So the exam, and ASPP did that at the request of the membership. We had all kind of gone to him and said, look, we need to develop some sort of competency exam. The part 1 is just a knowledge-based exam. We need something that tests their ability to actually apply what they know in the real world. So they developed part 2. So part 2 rocks along. And I think, John, I think there were academics involved in the development of it. I know they used what do y'all call it? A job task force analysis or something like that to figure out what's got to be in it. And they kind of gather from a very broad swath, academic, clinical folks, a very broad swath of the profession. So they develop it. We're rocking along once it gets developed. And then there were some concerns that came up about the disparities in, I guess, part 1 and part 2, and that kind of soured like TPA and some of the other members of the profession on the part 2 here in Texas. And so basically the board looked at it and said, well, look, we're going to hold off on adopting the part 2. Once it had been launched, we said, we're going to hold off. We're not going to be an early adopter. But one of the things I made sure that I pointed out back then, and that and other people knew, this was just something because Dr. Cartwright, you hit on it. The longer you go without an exam to replace the oral exam, you're building a data set as to whether a substitute needs to be put in place or not. I'm telling you right now, as the ED, I was the ED back then for y'all, and I'm the ED of this council now. I'm telling you, I don't know. I can't point you to any data that says we need a substitute in place for the oral exam. I can't say that complaints have gone up. I can't say that the severity of complaints have gone up. And even if I could, I don't know that I could point it to the fact that it's because of the lack of oral exam. Just because complaints go up, there could be a whole host of reasons. The Me Too movement resulted in a large spike in complaints. That had nothing to do with the oral exam. It had to do with, okay, people were tired of putting up with some crap and they decided to start complaining on it. So you got to be real careful, even if you looked at our data and said, oh, here's a spike that occurred after 2017 when they did away with the oral exam. I know I'm talking to you guys and you all know the statistics and how to read that. So I'm kind of preaching to the choir here, but what I'm trying to say is, Dr. Cartwright, I don't think there is any data to show that that doing away with the oral exam has caused some sort of detriment to the public. And I got to tell you, from a very practical standpoint, is the guy that has to deal with this stuff at the council level. And then Patrick and I are going to have to make the argument to the Regulatory Compliance Division, set all the academic arguments aside and just talk about that point that Dr. Cartwright made. If you can't show a need for it, how are you going to convince the council to impose another barrier to entry? Okay, it's a per se barrier. You can't say it's not. And that everything we do is a barrier, and there's nothing wrong with that. Don't think that's a dirty word. I'm not trying to say it is, but you got to convince the council. And then if you can convince the council, you got to convince the Regulatory Compliance Division in Governor Abbott's office. And I'm really struggling with how we're going to do that. I don't know.
But our other option is to remove any license. It's either all or nothing is what I'm hearing. So the other option is to not have a licensing exam, which is not also in the realm of what any other state does, as far as I know. So this is where I personally am struggling a lot with what ASPPB did here, because they're asking us to adopt something that they haven't entirely validated, at least to the burden of proof that their constituency wants. And they're asking us to adopt it all or nothing without a plan for rolling it out. That's I think what the crux of the challenge here is, Daryl, and where the debate comes in, is that they've really put everyone over a barrel and said, either take this whole thing or don't do it at all. And that puts folks in a really uncomfortable position.
So
I don't.
Hang on, Dr. Becker, you raised probably the best, most elephant in the room point that we haven't gotten to yet, and I'm really glad you brought it up. I'll tell you, I'm not going to throw any state under the bus specifically. I'll just say Texas is a big state and our opinion matters. There are other states that are also having, from my conversations that I've had, not everyone is on the questions, Dr. Becker, you're asking, Dr. Cartwright, that you're asking, and Donnie, some of your comments. You're not the only people saying that in positions. And the point is that if we say, here's our problem and we need either A, more time, or B, no, it needs to stay optional and we still want to take a wait and see approach on adopting this, that is entirely within our prerogative. We don't have to have the solution today on this thing. But it is more, each of you here was appointed by Governor Abbott and confirmed by the Texas Senate for your opinion to matter on how we license people in Texas. And the fact that we use the ASPPB test, we've got time to turn this ship, I think, if there's something that we need to see changed on this. So I don't think at this point, Dr. Becker, don't think that we're going to take it or leave it scenario. So then there's no question of it being being optional by state. It's literally all or nothing. Well, right now, that's what ASPB is positioned publicly as, all or nothing. Here it is. But my point is that if Texas and other states that with large enough licensing populations say, hold the phone, time out, we want to talk about this, I guarantee you we're gonna have a conversation about it. And that is entirely the prerogative of this board and other state licensing boards as well.
May I say something?
Absolutely.
I hear everyone and I agree with everyone's point of view, but I also read all, this 4C1 EPP factual overview, and ASPPB has tried to provide the answers to the kind of questions you all are asking. And I've read that, and they've given the data there. I recall some 100 people, psychologists were involved in creating the exam, and then they have had town hall meetings and all kinds of things they have tried to do for 2 years to create this. And they have given the answer to whether it's going to be helpful or not and all this. So I've read all that, and I'm not completely believing that it is a bad thing to do, but I also am hearing what Mr. Spink says. We don't have any data to show that having a second exam over the skills, not having, has made any difference in the numbers of complaints or licensures issued and all that. So in other words, we're still going on the same way, whether we have the oral exam or a written skills exam. So if that's the case, then why do we need to do it? But if you want to be, there are arguments given by this organization, or association, that why we should have it. And there are good arguments. And as an academician, I do like the idea very much. And I like the way they have created it. I don't have any problem with that. But why bring in things, more and more things, if we don't need them? That's where I am at. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Singh. I think the other thing for everyone, oh, go ahead, Andoni.
Regarding the need for the test, which is what Mr. Spink said, and Dr. Cartwright and Ms. Becker, Dr. Becker rather, Dr. Singh, I think what the problem seems to be is we took away the oral exam because it said it was subjective. So we're trying to make something that is a subjective issue into an objective issue by making a test for it. And if you pass the test, that means you made a 71, and so that means you're a good psychologist and competent now. No, I am going down on record as saying competency is not an objective measure. Competency says you got to go out there and do the work. That's why we've got the internship. That's why we have the postdoc. That's why we have all of this other stuff that goes along. If Andoni screws up, he's going to have somebody higher up saying, hey, don't do that again. And so you can't test for that. So the reason why we have an issue here, in my opinion, and I'm only 1 out of 9 or whatever, is that you're trying to make something that is a totally subjective thing, competency. I've worked with master's level people that are better than PhDs, and I've worked with PhDs that ought to be pumping gas. So competency is and I apologize, I'm not trying to offend anybody here. I'm just saying you can't test for somebody's ability to deal with somebody who's suicidal.
Thank you. Any other thoughts, questions?
Yes, I have just some observations, and again, this is just my opinion.
Let's hear
But
it.
I think really we need to try to access the people that would be in a position to provide information about their opinion about observations pre and post the elimination of the oral exam. and their observations about the people, the quality of the candidates that they're getting in some of those training programs, because they would be really in a position to inform us about what they're seeing, given the I guess fellowships and those sorts of training, opportunities that people would come into. And that would be, I think, a more helpful place for us if we really wanted that information. That information is out there. It's just, where do we access it? The other thing too, to somebody's point, and I can't remember who made the point, but to say that we really need a way. I mean, if you don't have an oral exam, then we need some way to indicate the applicability, the conceptualization of cases, their ability to diagnose, all of those things that kind of make us, as mental health professionals, be able to use our skills that we've learned and honed in, and putting them into practice and being supervised and going to supervision and all of those things, not just reading something out of the content of a textbook. I don't know that this is the right time for us. I definitely agree with Dr. Becker that given the impact of this, that we really need to take a slow approach to decide whether or not, and if we decide that it is beneficial to Texas to adopt this, to find out in what format. Do we take a wait and see? Do we adopt it right away? Do we create a program to assist and make ready all of those candidates that will be impacted by this, the implementation of the part 2 when it comes around and it's rolled out in 2026. If we're seeing disparity among certain populations, I think unfortunately that is only going to become worse given the impact on education in general that we have had with Corona. That's only going to be exacerbated in the future. So I think it's important for us to think about, and again, I fully recognize this is not under the purview of the board to be able to do that. This is education. But what can we put in place to bridge that gap? Just some thoughts.
Thank you, Dr. Lambden. I want to reiterate to everybody here, first of all, like, really great discussion. Nothing needs to be decided today. I mean, this just kind of got dropped on all of our desks, and it needed to get discussed. Thankfully, we have time to work on it. As the chair, like I said, I have already had a couple conversations with other states who are asking many of the same questions that you guys are. So we're going to keep having these conversations. And if anybody wants to talk to me, like, feel free to call me, email me, and we'll talk, and we can keep going from there. Any other thoughts?
I don't want to belabor the point, but I really like the way that Dr. Lambden is going with this in terms of engaging perhaps some key stakeholders that might be, I don't know, better aligned in this discussion to maybe some of the larger graduate programs in the area, just because I have a feeling that they'll have been on the pulse of what the EPPP looks like and what the impact would be, and just kind of get some feedback. I, for one, have never seen that, aside from like early test exam questions, what this exam really looks like and what it does add to kind of trainees coming out into the program and how it would impact our workforce and our workforce shortage across the board. So things like that, and who kind of in our state might be best aligned to contribute to that discussion. So I think that's a great idea.
I don't know who had their hand up first, Daryl or Andoni. Daryl, do you want to go?
Go ahead, Daryl.
I was just going to ask Dr. Becker and the rest of the board members, would it be helpful if we asked ASPPB if those of you that wanted to could actually sit for this thing, so that we're not talking about it in the abstract, you would actually go through it? Now, you wouldn't have to reveal if you failed it.
I wouldn't mind taking it. I'll tell you if I fail.
We can de-identify the pass fails.
Well, with all due respect, I would expect that our public members should fail and our professional members should pass based on what it's supposed to measure. That should tell you something.
I have a question.
I would think it would be helpful for some of y'all to take the thing so that we're not talking about something in the abstract. I'm not trying to condemn you to something, but I've laid eyes on some practice questions. I remember Luann Mock, she took an abbreviated practice version of it, but I don't know anybody that's taken the full thing.
That's a really, really good question, Daryl.
And it kind of seems like the type of test that there really aren't study materials for it. So, I mean, yeah, it's interesting.
Sorry, Andoni's had his hand up. What you?
Well, when Daryl and I put our hands up together, he must have been thinking what I was thinking. But I was going to add psychiatrists, and everybody can throw rocks at me if y'all want, but I worked with everybody, it seems. I've worked with psychiatrists, and I was supposed to like monitor their behavior because in their program, they were supposed to take Haldol. I don't know if anybody knows what Haldol is, but it's an extremely heavy-duty tranquilizer for some people, and you were supposed to monitor. So psychiatrists have them take in their own drugs that they're going to be prescribing so that they can know what it is that they're going to be given. I don't think there's any reason why the ASPP wouldn't allow us. You know, I mean, I don't know that I want to pay $5,000 to take the test, but I would like to take the test just to see what it is that we're subjecting our applicants to.
I want to say that reading this document that the ASPPB has submitted, and they're saying that it took them 5 years, and they have given this information about the misinformation and misunderstanding that they currently is being circulated, and those are very good answers. They satisfy me. I'm not dissatisfied from their presentation, and actually, I used to be an oral examiner, and I used to like those exams too. And there were at times some candidates that I failed, or my second examiner, there used to be 2 examiners failed, or both of us failed, that deserved failing. And it was done with very careful, I mean, it was lenient in my opinion. And they tried to make it where they had the vignette or a scenario of some kind, and then what would be the different answers that would be acceptable. So there was a lot of room for them to answer in different ways. And what I have understood is this exam has been more standardized, and it is also not difficult at the very high level. It's a minimal level of competency. And there was a question even raised that is that a good thing to have at the minimal level of competence? So I'm not against the exam itself or how they have created it. They have taken all the right steps to create an exam, and it is standardized. It is an objective exam, and it is sometimes kind of exams we give to our students where we have a kind of case scenario, and they read it and then they answer the questions. But my compelling argument for me is, since we are right now thinking how to make this user-friendly licensure, so to say, so that more people who are deserving are licensed to practice, so that we don't have shortage. For that, Mr. Spink's argument is the only one that satisfies me. to say we're not ready to take this one right now is that he says that his figures have not changed after doing away with the oral exam. And I used to be very much against removing the oral exam. But he says that there hasn't been much change. So if there hasn't been any change in many aspects of the licensure, then why implement another exam and create extra cost or work for the board? My question is, do we have to accept it in 2026?
That is the position that ASPPB has taken. What I'm saying is that if enough people raise questions, I don't believe the matter is settled. I think everything that has been said here is being asked, and I don't know, we're probably one of the first boards to meet, on the heels of this announcement. I can just tell you from the discussions that I'm having, this discussion is going to happen in a bunch of other states is this a take it or leave it? We don't agree with that. We would like another bite at that apple, and we would like something changed, or we would like it, up to and including, we'd like it to stay optional as it is right now. And we'd like to see the wait and see approach, because a handful of states have adopted it. I think 7 perhaps. There's not a long track record yet of that, but Dr. Lambden has her hand up here. Go to Dr. Lambden.
Thank you. Just some thoughts. When and if we decide, I think as a board, and if I am at that point part of the discussion, I was just kind of thinking about, different people bring different strengths to the process. And so some people are better at, just testing through an exam through paper and pencil and that sort of thing. And then there's other individuals that are better suited to what was or a format like the oral exam that used to be. I took the oral exam, I took the written exam. And so I think people are just different, and some people are adaptable. But is it possible, or maybe we should consider when that time comes, I'd like to hear people's thoughts about offering people a choice to say, would you prefer an oral exam? And if you don't prefer an oral exam, would you prefer a written exam? In testing not the content necessarily, but the applicability, what the EPPP would test, the second one. Any thoughts?
I disagree with that, because there were too many problems with oral exam, not just with the exam or anything, but to get people to test it, to have the venue to test it. And it's just was a real laborious thing for people and for the board. And also it is, people have to travel to the Austin to take the exam. It was not very convenient for everyone, especially for the board staff. And so I think that's not a good idea. But this exam, if we don't have to adopt before 2026, why bother about it right now? By then, I already know there is some state has adopted. I've forgotten which one it is. I mix up Arkansas with some other state, so I can't tell you the exact name, because our students are already up on it, and they are bringing the information. Oh, this is what happened in Nebraska, this happened there, and this and happened there. But what I'm saying is, if we don't have to take action before 2026, we should wait and see how the other states do and what their experience is, and we'll be the last one to take it if we want to. So why do we have to worry about it right now? Things are going fine. Why bother to change it right now?
Thank you, Dr. Singh. Dr. Cartwright?
Yeah, and I agree with Dr. Singh on that as well. I guess I had more of a question, and I don't know if anyone can answer, but what is the process then? Like, what is the process for bringing these questions to light with the ASPPB? I mean, is this something where each state's going to kind of do this separately and bring those questions to like some sort of forum, or is there any more voting on this, or is this just a done deal? I mean, it's 4 years until it's enacted. So I guess my question is like, what can be done? What are the options and what can be done in that time? And is this going to be just an open discussion within states? I don't know if anyone has any insight on that.
I'll tell you, Dr. Cartwright, it's a great question. I'll tell you probably my plan. I'll probably send a note to ASPPB describing this conversation and say, hey, this is not a clear path on a regulatory or rulemaking level for us. There's not clear consensus on the board. There's not clear consensus in the Texas educational community by virtue of a couple of the comments that we've received. There's not clear consensus from the industry, from the profession. And so, and kind of hit it back to him and say, here's where we are. So, because that's the other thing, Dr. Cartwright, I said it a minute ago. Each of us here has been appointed by the governor and confirmed by the Senate to carry this out in Texas. ASPPB is a completely different animal that encompasses a whole lot of stakeholders that we don't answer to. They don't have to, ASPPB doesn't have to answer to the ledge or to the governor. We do. Or the people of Texas. We do. So I think that that's important to keep in mind. And again, we got time to work this problem. In Apollo 13, when they realized that they weren't going to land on the moon, they weren't quite sure how they were going to get the astronauts home. I kind of don't know exactly the solution for this right now, but we're going to keep working on it. And I think if we all keep that attitude of working on it, I'm fully confident we're going to end up in a great place. I don't know what it looks like, though.
I have a humorous analogy of this situation is same thing as coronavirus vaccination. Should you take it or should you not take it? So we're in the similar kind of situation. One should watch and see what happens to the other. If others die, don't take the vaccine. If everybody lives, take the vaccine. So we're just, I don't think we need to do anything, just wait and see.
Dr. Cartwright, did I answer your question?
Yeah, you did. Thank you.
Okay. All right. Again, we don't have to solve this today. So unless anyone has anything else, I'm going to go ahead and move on. If anyone has any closing statements, though, I would say speak up. Okay. With that, we'll move on. Thank you, everybody, for all the thoughtfulness on this subject. We're going to keep working on it. Moving on to, okay, let's go to, just hang on, a housekeeping item at 11 o'clock. I've got 10:51 right now. Daryl, will you tell us what we're doing at 11?
We're going to take up the study plan, the applicant study plan under 6AI.
So just be ready to shift gears on that, guys, at a time certain in 9 minutes. But with that, I'll go ahead and turn it over to enforcement. Do we have anything we need to do in enforcement?
Diane, I think your mic's off.
Okay, sorry about that. So it's just our standard reporting that we have. I don't know if anyone in enforcement wants to take the lead, but under 5A, we have review of dismissals by the board or executive staff. So that is there under 5AI. There were 21 cases dismissed by the agency. 1 second here. Okay, and then you'll see the status reports under 5A II. There, the status reports for the fourth quarter are listed. Which shows, let's see. They have the breakdowns for the different categories. So there were 0 in category 1 for psychology, which category 1 is imminent physical harm. And under priority 2, which is sexual misconduct, there were 3 psychology cases. And under priority 3, which is the general applicants, there were 1 under psychology. So our numbers are still pretty low as far as, when you look at the category levels. And that's the only breakdown they provide us for. The rest is just collectively under the council as a whole.
Good deal. Do we need to do ISC assignments for the next one?
Yes.
Let me look at that real quick.
Let me pull that up.
So Ryan is our public member on the one prior to this. I'll go ahead and volunteer myself as the other public member present here today. We'll need any other volunteers.
And once you get the volunteers for this, I want to speak on one thing real quick. I'll let
Very good.
y'all finish this up.
Any other volunteers?
I'd be happy to volunteer, but I'm already on the one previously.
That's okay. Glad to see you step up. We got Indoni,
All right.
and we need
I'll
a,
volunteer also. I mean, so we can switch
I
off,
can do
Andoni
it.
and I.
You need a, yeah, I mean,
we need an LP, I think. So Dr. Becker.
I'm fine with it.
Okay. So Indoni and Dr. Becker and me. And we'll keep Herman as an alternate there if we need it.
Okay.
All right, Daryl, you want the floor?
All right, we've got, I'm not going to go into it here because it's, I don't want to, for conflict reasons, I'm not going to get into detail, but we've got a complaint pending where we had to temporarily suspend a psychologist, and the council does that, and the council obviously draws off of the council members. So Chair Belemowitz, Dr. Cartwright, and Chair Conseco served on the temporary suspension panel. That complaint, and I think some others against the same individual, are going to be coming up for an ISC shortly. Because of the nature of the complaint, we're kind of expediting it, the seriousness of it. I need an ISC panel to deal with that. I don't want to use, I don't know who's on the existing one, but unless it's Chair Belemowitz and Dr. Cartwright, I don't want to use them because I don't want to conflict out 5 members of this board. So that if this thing comes back from SOA, 5 of you have to recuse yourself, and I'm stuck just dealing with 4 members. So what I'm trying to say is I need a special ISC panel. I need one. I need Dr. Cartwright. I need Chair Belemowitz, and I need one more.
I can volunteer.
Well, I probably need an LPA member.
I'll do it.
Okay.
Herman, yeah, let's do Herman. Volunteered a second ago without a
Okay.
place to go. So let's do Herman.
Okay. Patrick, you got that? John? Okay. That's your panel.
Thank you, Mr. Adler. And thank you, Dr. Singh, for stepping up as well. Okay. Is that it for enforcement? No, do we need?
Well, just for reference, there is a agreed order that there's no action needed, but it was approved by the staff. It's in your packet if you want to look at it.
Is that 5B1? There we go.
B1, yeah.
Okay. Any questions? Okay, are we ready to go? I guess we're a little bit early. Are we good to go into is it 6A1? I'm sorry, Daryl. Did you say it was 6A1?
It's 6A1 or 6A2. I think in the materials it's 6A1, but or 6A2, I'm sorry. But she's here, so we can go ahead and do it.
Yeah, let's go for it then.
Okay, let me bring her on here.
Patrick or Diane, are y'all gonna lay this out as to what we're doing here?
Sure. Let me pull it up here. So we have Miss Stephanie Escontrias. She has submitted a EPPP study plan. This, let's see, I believe this will be her 4th attempt to sit for it. And it did go before the applications committee. And they asked that she go back and work with her supervisor to improve her study plan of what she had provided to the section. So that information is in here. Her prior plan is in your packet as well as a point of reference. I guess the concern that the committee had, try to get back up here, was on the attempts that she did take the test. Her scores are really low. So the committee wanted to bring it before the full board.
That's a couple more things about it.
Sure.
Please.
I think it was more than 4, right, Diane? Like many more than 4 attempts.
Yes,
And this is, she has a history of, she was in combat, right? History of TBI in combat. You know, and so, and we saw just not a lot of improvement in her scores, and not I think many scores that got up above 400. So I think we felt that it was something that we couldn't make it at the committee level, you know, the study plan, because I think we needed to talk to her and her supervisor, and because there's a complicating issue with the TBI and things like that. So that's what our thinking was.
Hold on, I think she was just here.
And we've
she's
got
here.
licensing staff here too. If I think Monica is the one that's going to be handling this. So Monica's out there. We can bring her up if y'all have any questions for her as well. In fact, Diane, won't you go ahead and bring Monica over, and then Monica, you just stay muted unless they ask you something.
Yeah, she's over. Miss Escontrias, are you there?
Yes, can you hear
Yes, we
me?
can hear you.
Okay.
So we want to
I
give
was
you a couple.
listening, I'm sorry.
We just want to say thanks for being here. Give you a few minutes to describe. We've got your paperwork here, but give you a chance to address us and tell us what we need to hear.
Yes. So with me, you were exactly right. I am a combat veteran and traumatic brain injury. Currently, I'm receiving retraining from the military specialists that deal with traumatic brain injuries. I've had recent surgeries
You're breaking up.
Can't really hear you. You're breaking up.
Ms. Escontrias, if you can hear us, hang on a second. We cannot hear you.
Says Contreras, you might try, we can hold off for a little bit. You might try calling in rather than on your computer. If because you're not coming through.
Can we give her, hopefully she can hear us. Can you give her that number?
Well, it'll be on the, it's on the
Yeah.
same thing where she got the link.
Okay, good. All right. Okay.
Maybe we can come back to her. She can resolve the problem and we go.
Yeah, while we're doing that, is there anything that Monica feels like Monica wants to lay out for us that we need to hear that's not included in the paperwork? Oh, wait, no, Ms. Escontrias.
Yeah, good morning. I don't specifically have any issues with the applicant. It's just, this was our second study plan. So I guess I just wanted to take it to the full board and have them review it, but I don't specifically have any issues.
Essentially, the only thing that's being asked is for us to just approve the study plan again if we're gonna let her sit again, correct? Am I
Yes,
missing?
sir.
Okay. Okay, do y'all want to table this for a minute and see if we can get Ms. Escontrias back on the phone?
Ms.
Sure.
Escontrias, I'm gonna share my screen. It's gonna have the number that you can call in. Just log out, call into this number, and we're gonna be monitored. There's only one other phone caller in there, so it'll be easy to see a new caller pop in. Oops, see here, 3.
Oh, she's got her hand raised.
I'm sorry, can you hear me now?
We
Yeah.
can hear you.
Okay, I'm just gonna put the number just in case because I feel like I have very bad connection here at the office. Our internet system is not that great. So-
Oh, we lost her.
We're losing you again.
Just go ahead and call us, Ms. Escontrias. We'll find you in the attendee list.
Cheryl, while we're waiting on this, do you see on the insights over lunch or discussion on reciprocity, are those things that you can hammer real quick while we're waiting? If you just want to wait.
I'd go ahead and talk about reciprocity.
Let's do that.
Yeah, a while back, I had talked to y'all about, it's been years ago, actually. I had started, after Sunset, we began exploring the possibility of reciprocity with other jurisdictions. I really tried to focus on our neighbors, New Mexico, Oklahoma, Arkansas, Louisiana. Used to have reciprocity with Louisiana, but because they still have the oral exam and we do not, I never really thought that was a possibility again. I began reaching out to our neighbors and to other states as well. And what I ran into is we're kind of a unicorn. We're one of the only states that actually has statutory authority to do reciprocity agreements. So what the jurisdictions I was encountering were like, hey, that'd be something we'd at least be willing to talk about. We don't even have authority to do it. The ledge won't let us do it in our state. So New Mexico was that way. We used to have reciprocity with them, their legislature. Somebody over there told them, hey, you don't have authority to do this, so knock it off. We lost it. Oklahoma, we used to have reciprocity with them under the ASPPB umbrella reciprocity agreement. When we did away with the oral exam, it pulled us out of that. Long story short, I started talking with my counterpart in Oklahoma, and their board likes the idea of reciprocity. They want to do it. They unfortunately do not have the authority right now. What they did is they came to Patrick and I and said, look, can y'all show us what the agreement would look like? Can you give us an example of what you think it would look like so that we can take it to the ledge and then say, this is what we want to do. Can y'all give us authority to do it? So that's what we did. I'd actually drafted a template reciprocity agreement way back when I first started shopping. And so Patrick tweaked it to fit Oklahoma. And that's what you see. That's what's in your packet there that you're looking at. That's just a draft. I'm not even saying that's what it's going to look like fully and finally, if Oklahoma can get it passed. But what we're waiting on now is to see, can the Oklahoma Association and board find a sponsor to carry the bill in their legislature. And if they can, I think probably the earliest we'd be looking at doing something like this would be mid to late next year, 2023, possibly into 2024. So it's not going to be a fast fix. It won't happen quickly. Nothing ever does in government. Y'all been here long enough now. Y'all should know that. But it is movement. So I'm pretty pleased with that. I think John and I both flirted with Arkansas at ASPPB with this idea, and I didn't really get the feeling that they were all that keen on it. But not from my counterpart anyways. I don't know, John, what your take on it was.
The same. What I found on the reciprocity discussion is how different it's highlighted. I mean, even the EPPP discussion about how different each jurisdiction operates just with the nuts and bolts. A lot of them can't do it. A lot of them, I'm not going to throw any state specifically under the bus here, but I'll be candid. What I heard in some of my discussions with a couple of different states, there's an attitude of it's a pretty heavy lift, because in a lot of them, like, they have to open up their statute. And when you're going to when you open up that Pandora's box, they're afraid everyone's going to chime in on changing a whole lot of other things. And so I think that there is an aversion in a lot of cases to open that up if they don't have to. I know different states have different sunset processes. And I understand the pushback, because it felt a little bit like, hey, do you just want to go through sunset for the heck of it, like to get reciprocity? And if somebody asked me that, I'd say no, I don't really want to go through that. And so that's the dynamic. And so I said it in my talk at ASPPB. I was like, open invitation to Texas. Like, we'd love to talk about reciprocity. So far, no takers. But I only say that to if it comes up in y'all's discussions, like, let's have at it. Let's talk about it.
I kind of dropped a hint with Missouri to see what Missouri would think about it. They're kind of interested in it. I think they're going to struggle with do we have authority to do it? As odd as it sounds, I wish that California that I could, because there's so much exchange between us and California. I wish that were a possibility, but I talked with my counterpart out there a while back, and there's something, I don't think they have authority to do it is the problem there. So that's going to be a no-go. And same way for New York. Florida, I'd like to do it with Florida as well, being a big jurisdiction. The problem is Florida makes it easy to come in. They're not as concerned about the outbound traffic. Their folks being able to, go to a different jurisdiction. They've made it very easy to move into Florida, to practice in Florida, but they don't move as fast or as hard on outbound traffic. So I'll broach that subject with them, but I'm not holding my breath on it.
Well, Texas and Florida and New York California and New York are the two places that I know have slightly different licensure requirements than some other states. Just some additions and sort of funky changes that a lot of other states are not standard. Like New York has a different algorithm for each OP pass rates, and California has a couple of specific California-specific classes that are required. So that might also just be barriers or hoops that tend to get in the way of things.
Yeah, and Dr. Landon probably can speak to that too, but I know California for sure, there's like additional courses you take and like just another set of requirements. New York as well. Yeah, they're both kind of different in the way they do things. Dr. Landon.
Yeah, I was licensed in California and continue that licensure. And really, it isn't a hurdle. Certainly, California has required, I think, a 6 continuing ed course on suicide assessment, prevention, domestic violence, and I think there might be one other one, kind of along the same requirement, the same structure. So it isn't overwhelming in terms of, if you really wanted to pursue reciprocity, that and of course everything else checked off, it isn't really a huge hurdle that that I think most people could would prevent most people from taking part.
Yeah, I've never viewed California as being really all that different from us on the standards. They've got some, I call them practice or maintenance differences, the CE type stuff. But as far as getting in, I don't think we're all that different. They used to be when they had the state, instead of like regionally accredited schools, you could have a state accredited program. That was a different animal back then, but they've done away with that now, or it's going away. So with that change, I saw Mrs. Contreras.
Yes.
Now,
here. Mhm.
okay. Is she the 808 number, 808 area code?
Yes. Mhm.
All right. Are we ready for her?
Yeah, I'll bring her on here. And what does she need to do to unmute, Daryl?
*6.
*6 to unmute.
Yes, hello. Can everybody hear me?
Yes, ma'am.
Mhm.
Yeah.
Okay, thank goodness.
All right.
I'm just going to, I believe the last thing you guys heard was that I'm doing some retraining with the VA. So they are very receptive. They're great with the medical care. I just had surgeries to remove some debris from my traumatic brain injury. Tomorrow I actually get the stitches out. So it is, it's been a journey, but definitely I also have a lot of anxiety. So a lot of the issue is I will do exams and everything like that with the ATABs, but when I'm doing it over the computer or when I'm doing the practice exams, my anxiety level is not as high as when I go and do the exams in person. And that also plays into it, where I have really bad performance anxiety when it comes to the test, because I know how much weighs on the test. And then along with it, having to deal with the recovery. Do you guys have any questions of me? I don't know how much of the letter everyone has read that I wrote for the study plan.
I do have a question for you. You mentioned the increased anxiety. Do you feel like that's also a component of what you're dealing with from the TBI, or do you feel like you've always had an issue with test anxiety?
No, I do believe it's has a lot to do with the traumatic brain injury, just because I, just kind of like negative self-talk when I'm in there. I am my own worst enemy when it comes to the exam, because I went through school, did not have any challenges, because, the tests were in person. I've also completed, during my master's, I did the LPC exam. I'm from Hawaii, so it's the LMHC. And I had no issues, but this is a whole different caliber. This for me means an extreme amount. So my anxiety, when I say extreme, it goes really, really high, to the point where I'm having to take a lot of bathroom breaks, because my heart is racing. It is as if I had just got done running a 2-mile, PT test or something. It's pretty intense because it weighs heavily in. And there have been times where I've actually done the exam and I have found it difficult to finish within a timely manner. So that's why I get that extra time, because I have to stop and take breaks. And so my anxiety does play into it. It's not that I can't do it or can't perform at the level, because I have passed everything else. It's the idea of when I get in there, I am so at an extreme, everything, even my breath rate is where I'm hyperventilating just in my own thoughts of how much this means to me. So it does play a lot into that.
Okay.
Did you have these same issues when you sat for the LMHC exam or the LPC exam?
No, sir.
What? I guess I'm going to just ask the plain question. Why do you think that is? Why do you think that exam didn't elicit this reaction, but the EPPP does?
Because I knew I was going to go on to my doctorate. So whether I just got the licensure to, because I always feel like it's, just like a sense of accomplishment, but I knew I was going to move on to my doctorate level. So it did not weigh heavily on me. If I didn't pass the exam, I didn't have any anxiety towards it. It wasn't that I would not be kind of like, oh my gosh, I can't believe I didn't pass it. I took that once and passed on one try with no problem. So for me, it was because I didn't play any sort of high level of concern as much as I have with this exam. This exam is so monumental for me that is what plays into my anxiety level. So for me, I'm working on, especially with the retraining, just like calming everything down, because when I'm with patients, I am not very anxious or anything like that. It's not that I present at that level, the same level when I'm taking the exam. It truly is because of the exam and what it means to me that it ends up also being where I am hyper, like I'm very hyper, where I have to stand up even doing the exam in the separate room from everyone else, just because it's hard for me to sit still, because I do feel anxious in the room. And, so it's not that I don't believe that I can pass it. I do. It is that halfway through, I'm completely freaked out. And I'm like, oh my God. And I can't even tell you how bad it can get for me. But I'm learning how to calm everything down. And I'm saying this with a smile just because that has been my detriment, like working on that. And all of my friends are also psychologists who some, at least 3 of my other friends have also been combat veterans, where we're also working on that in a peer group. And so that's also been helpful.
Ms. Contreras, did I say your name right?
Yes, Escondrias.
Okay.
That's correct.
First of all, I want to thank you for your service. That's very, very commendable. When I have ADA students, I give them 50% more time on their exams. If you got more time, can you kind of take breaks and calm down and come back and take it? Complete the exam if you got 50% more time?
Oh, no, now I can complete it with a 50% more time. I'm having that kind of ability, I believe, with the time, having more time. I did not have that for, at least I want to say, for a few of my test exams. So for me, it was just kind of like timing it and where I'm able to get up and take those breaks. So I had it for the most recent test where I had to put in for that. Just because I think like with ATABs and COVID, something happened where my thing had expired from when I originally put it in, my disability paperwork. So I had to resubmit that to ATABs to have that where I could have that extra time.
And what do you think is the solution for your situation? What would help you the best?
For me, I do think, well, definitely I have to have the extra time and the separate room. But for me, I've been doing a lot of like practice. So basically I pay for the practice exams where I can then practice it, even though it's within my home setting. So it doesn't provide the same type of, feedback where my body doesn't respond exactly the same. However, I have been working with Department of Veteran Affairs on, and I call it retraining, but overall it is, decreasing my level of anxiety when it comes to performance. And this is something that I've brought up to them that I've wanted to work on at least within the last year. Because I feel that that is part of my retraining and should be part of the counseling, because anxiety is, when it comes to something that's extremely important, I need to conquer it. So for me, it's just basically knowing that I can do it and moving forward.
Thank you for answering my questions.
Oh, thank you.
Ms. Escondrias, I have a question, if that's okay.
Yes. Yes.
Yes. So help me to understand in terms of your TBI, the acquisition of that injury, and your sitting for the LPC exam. Can you tell me, just in reference in chronology, when was the time frame for that TBI? Was it before or after that exam?
I took the exam, so it was after. I took the exam in, let me see, I believe it was 2015 for my my LPC. Yeah. And that was a few years after my TBI. So for me, it, you know, I would say that it is typically, and I was still seeing Department of Veteran Affairs. We weren't doing as intense as we are doing it now, just because the TBI clinic wasn't what it is now, with the providers and the attention that they're you know, putting into the traumatic brain injuries. I believe it's the level and importance that also I have played into the exam. I think the fact that I go in there and I am already at a very high level of anxiety when I go in there. And that, so I've been working on that. So for me, I don't believe that it's just the traumatic brain injury itself. I do believe that it is also the anxiety. So I put myself at that level. And I think gaining awareness, saying to myself that I do have control over that, I put myself at that level, because the fact that I did not do that for the other exam, you know, speaks at least to my ability to accomplish it. Hopefully I answered the question.
Yes, yes, no, thank you very much. It does help to understand in terms of the timeline, and it speaks really highly in terms of your ability to be able to given that injury, to succeed. I think what it highlights for me in particular, and I can only speak for myself, is, and I think you're hitting it here, is that the anxiety seems to be playing a larger part for you. That's not, again, not to say that and really, you know, minimize the impact of the TBI. And I see your study plan. My question to you, to do it really effectively, what is it, and maybe you have it, maybe it's just becoming clearer to you as we talk about it. What is it that you feel that you can incorporate into a study plan that addresses the anxiety for you?
Oh, now I am definitely, you know, I see my counselors at the VA. That helps. In the beginning, it wasn't so much me acknowledging that. So when I first took the exams, I knew I had anxiety, but it wasn't the acknowledgement of going in and actually putting forth and doing that, as well as, you know, doing the extra study exams. For me, when I first started doing the exams, I did not have the financial funds because I do work for a rural community, where the setting is where, even with the PsyD, you know, working even under my LPC license, it's still where we do not make that much money. And so for me to pay $2,000 for a bundle, I could not do that. So that I had put that as part of my study plan initially, because I've had to really do a multitude of things to make sure that I can even pay for the practice exams. So that has been the challenge, is affording to get the study material. And I know that can be a challenge for other individuals as well, because the prices are so outrageous.
Mrs. Contreras, this is John Bolamowitz. Question I have, are we understanding correctly though, with this study plan you're asking us to approve, you're prepared to execute and you're already doing this, or are you going to do these test preps? Where is that? Can you clear that up for me? Where are we? Where are we going?
Oh, yes, definitely. So I've already started doing this. And it's just through, also now I have asked my company to, and I did not do this before because I did not know this was an option, because of how small our clinic is and funds wise. I have asked my company, so I put forth the payment and they reimbursed me for it. And it may not be for, you know, a certain period of time where they're like, okay, this is over the amount, but they have limited me to 2,000. So at least for me, I've been able to, and that's a good amount where at least I can do 3 months, and I do like the bundles as well. And they have extended where they'll give you 2,000 for study material, and then they'll do 2,000 for licensure. So things that that I did not know was available for our clinic, just because as time goes on, the government funding changes. So now we're able to do things more so now because we've been able to apply for more government funds that allows the providers the ability to do so. So yes, I've already set that plan in action.
Okay, yeah, that was my question. Do we have any further questions? Hearing none. Ms. Escontrias, thank you for being here to explain your situation. The board's going to discuss this now. So among the board now, any thoughts, motions? What we do here?
I just wanted to let
Oh,
you guys know
sure.
that I appreciate your time. I'm sorry.
No, go ahead.
Oh, I was just going to say that I appreciate the time and you know, of course, of everybody listening to what I had to say, and I'm always available to answer any further questions as well.
Thank you very much. Thanks for being here.
Thank you.
I move that we need to give, we need to approve her request.
Heard the motion. Is there a second?
I second.
the motion.
It's been seconded. Is there any discussion?
I just wanted to,
Sorry.
sorry.
Nope. Go ahead.
I just wanted to point out, I really appreciated her coming on and speaking to us and making her case. I thought that was incredibly helpful. So I just wanted to put that into the record.
Very good. Any other discussion? All right. All those in favor of approving signify by saying aye.
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 Opposed, say no. The ayes have it. Thank you very much. All right, Ms. Escontrias, if you're still on there, go get them. All right, where are we? And why are we here? Existential questions.
We're on
I
six.
can't answer that.
I feel like that's way outside our scope.
Okay, so we've got compliant. There's no, is there anything on compliance for 6B? Hang on. I see none. 6C, exam status, jurisprudence
Right.
exam.
Yeah, there's just a brief update here. Tim and I met with the e-strategy for our jurisprudence exam, and the original discussion happened at one of our the June meeting, talking about barriers to licensure, and they weren't able to give us too much of a detailed report. So they were able to recently break this down by the license types of the individuals taking it. But they are trying to still work on the numbers as far as which ones are first attempt, second attempts, you know, multiple attempts, like how people are scoring there. But we are in the process of making some changes to where we have demographic questions that we asked, and they're working on trying to figure out whether we pull them out, put them as part of the registration, or keep them within the question banks within the exam itself. So they said they could run the numbers either way at this point. So we're working with them. We plan on adding some type of survey at the end of the exam to get feedback from the test takers. So that is in the works. And then we are also, we asked them as far as once the, since people can or will be able to take the exam for CE credit. So we're having an option built into it at some point to ask that question, why are they taking it for initial licensure or for CE credit? And then if they're taking it for CE credit, once they finish and pass, they'll get a certificate of completion. Excuse me, they'll get a certificate of completion emailed to them. And then we just have a couple phases that we're trying to build in. They mentioned that they do have a way to have some type of instructional information before they even take the jurisprudence exam to kind of get them in a mindset of, the rules and, how things are placed. The items listed under categories in different cases. So, we're working on that. That's something we will have to build. So once we get to that phase of it, we are going to work with the jurisprudence committee on how that structure is going to look as well. And then, because we are due to re-look at our questions. So that would be kind of the last phase of it. Right now, I'm still waiting on them to give me timelines on when all these phases will occur, but we're working on trying to get, at least the data, at least a little clearer for you guys. So is there anything else you guys were looking to see out of this, or do you think we're kind of moving in the right direction of what you guys wanted?
Diane, when are we due to look at questions again?
It's past due now. And to my understanding, normally there's a whole psychometric thing that you guys do. And you guys, from our last discussion, the board did not want to go to a no-fail test. So I guess we're still kind of looking at how all this is going to work. But in the meantime, we are trying to fix the structure of it and hopefully, get better data together. So when you guys are looking at it, you can kind of look at what questions, need to be revamped, or just looking at our current laws and rules to see if you want to just restructure it. It would be nice to have a pool of questions, because right now, every question we have is being tested. So it'd be nice to just have a pool of questions, and then a certain percentage is pulled out for when people are taking it. It gives a chance to make a variety of a test versus everyone taking the same test questions each time.
I was just curious, what's the pass rate right now on the jurisprudence for, I guess for LPs and LPAs? And I guess LSSPs take it too, correctly? If I'm not correct.
Yes, so since the council started, let me see if I can share this with you guys.
Just thinking of materials here,
Yeah,
not good.
yeah, it's not.
In looking at that data, it's a little bit strange because I don't think it's talking about individuals. I think it's talking about questions, because there's no way we've had, thousands and thousands of people take the jurisprudence exam over the last 2 years.
Mm-hmm. Yeah,
So it's not a super intuitive bit of information that they've given us here.
right. Yes. This is as far as they've gotten with it so far. So
Tim, can you zoom in on that? Give me geezer font level.
okay, because I can't see how much you guys can see. Is that big enough?
There you go. There you
Okay.
go.
This is also in your packet as 6D.
Yeah.
If anyone wants to come back to this.
Mhm. It's in the individual documents.
Yeah.
folder.
So this company that we have that's doing this, are we able to get the information broken down by question? So that we can actually look at whether there are specific questions that consistently get failed that might be bad questions?
I did that last time, Dr. Becker, when the last time I did the validation study, I'm not sure why they're telling us they can't do that now. I don't understand it, because the last time I validated this exam, it was exactly like we have it now. And what they're telling us is, well, I can't break it down by the demographic data that you have, because your demographic question is a test question, not part of your registration question. And I'm like, none of this makes sense to me, because I had it validated through Rice University last time and they did all this for me. So I'm a little flustered by why we're having this kind of trouble, but I'm also not going to beat my head against a wall arguing with somebody over something that happened 4 years ago and how they're doing it now. Sometimes it's easier just to go along and then try to fix something. The phrase I was going to say, I better not in this forum, but I'll watch what I say here. We should be able to do that. Yes. And I don't know why we cannot. And that's what we're trying to fix now, because we did it before. It's the same company, the same type of information. And I'm not sure why we cannot get that now. And that I'm a little peeved over that, but me being peeved doesn't get us there. So let me work on it.
No, I think this is to me, and I said this when we had the meeting in June, what I'm looking at is very inactionable data, because I can't interpret it. Because I'm looking at it and it doesn't tell me the last way that we have the data, you couldn't tell how many people had taken the test more than once. Everything is grouped in there together. So you have these very high fail rates, but it includes people who have taken the exam 2, 3, 5 times in with people who passed it the first time. So you're inflating your fail rate, which is very confusing. So we don't have it by test question. We don't have it by multiple takers. We just have everything lumped together. So I don't have interpretable data to work with. So I'm trying to, the question of, do we have to revise the test? The answer is probably yes, but the question of how do we revise the test based on questionable data and the interpretability of the data is really hard to a bunch of scientists. So that's what I'm struggling with.
You're describing the same thing I struggled with when COVID was rampant, the data, and I was like, oh, there's so many cases, and somebody said, yeah, but they're counting the person who's taking a test 3 times trying to get a negative. They're counting that as three cases. And so it's like, okay, wait, how do we determine where are we if we have no idea with the data? The same scenario. And I don't know if that was fake news or if that's actually what happened, but that was what I heard. So.
And so why can't they break it down by question? Like, I feel like they should be able to do that. And multiple test takers. Like, I feel like
we haven't gotten much information as to why they can't do what we're asking them to do. What would be helpful, I think, is if like Dr. Becker or whomever could maybe shoot Diane an email of exactly what they want. Say, I want a breakdown of failures by question. I want a breakdown of failures by license type. I want a breakdown of failures by number of attempts, that kind of thing. And then what we'll do is take that back to eStrategy and get a better answer as to why they can or cannot provide that data. It has been it has been a struggle, and we're not sure why.
Well, we can tell them that it took over 10 minutes of a discussion in a public meeting of of why we can't see this data or why we can't understand it. So
Yeah.
I will say one thing, and I'm gonna poke at y'all a little bit on this. I'm like, this is why I wanted to switch. Part of the reason I want to switch to a no-fail exam and use it as more of an educative effort rather than a vetting tool like we're using it now, is because this is an incredibly complex thing to have to do for the jurisprudence exam. And it just seems like, I honestly don't think the juice is worth the squeeze here on this. From an administrative and an efficiency standpoint, it's just not. And when I look at the other boards and they use the no-fail exams, chaos doesn't ensue in their professions as a result of it. So
It kind of becomes a barrier to licensure, which is something that there's a great deal of spotlight on at the moment. And so that's something to consider as well. On the other professions, it's an educational tool. This one, my understanding is it's an open book exam as well. So it's, if you're giving an open book exam, are you really testing somebody's knowledge, or are you just testing their ability to find it? So it would be very helpful to staff, and I don't think it would be harmful to the profession or to the people of the state of Texas if it was moved to the same format as the other professions.
Many years ago, it was the board members who gave the questions for that exam. And you're not doing that anymore, Mr. Singh?
no, we're not. I guess if we wanted to drag all y'all to Austin and administer this thing in person.
No, we gave the written questions.
Oh, I'm sorry. I thought you meant you came to Austin.
Took our questions and then they developed exam from that.
Yes, we do that. The other boards do that as well, though, too. They actually develop the questions, and then everybody's doing that way.
My only sort of challenge to that is that the psych board also has a much lower rate of complaints. And is there any correlation to actually having folks study their standards?
I don't know if you can say you got a lower rate of complaints when you look at on the per licensee basis. So, you got 30,000, over 30,000 LPCs, almost 30,000 social workers. So when you're naturally going to see more complaints in their area. I don't know. We'll have to crunch those numbers, but I don't think you're going to find a large disparity there and say, well,
okay,
psych has
that's fair.
Complaints.
all right, we good there?
Yeah.
Okay, we've been going for about an hour and 45. We have left to do rules, insights over lunch, and future agenda items. So let's go ahead and take a 10-minute break. I have 11:46. So let's be back at 11:56, or 10 minutes from whatever your clock says right now. And we'll go from there.
Okay, I'll pause the recording.
Thank you.
Okay. You have it.
All right, the time being 11:56, Texas State Board of Examiners of Psychologists is back in session. I'm going to go into rulemaking. We're going to go to, hang on, we don't have anything on 7A. Yeah, that's right. So we're going straight into rules, recommending adoption to the council. We'll start with 463.8. And I understand we have a typo on here that needs to be corrected, and then we can talk it out. Patrick, is that right? What's the typo? And is it corrected in here, or do you have to correct it?
No, we need to adopt with the correction. So it's going to be an F2. And when I think we originally looked at this, it was G. And so it had said in F2, referring back to subsection G1, but it should be F1 because we proposed the deletion of D, so we had to renumber, and that's where the typo came about because we didn't change the lettering. So the correct the correct should be F1, not at G1, right there. Yep, right there.
Gotcha. I'm going back here to, we had comment on this as well. Does anyone have any discussion on this?
I don't know if now's the time, Mr. Chair, but if you want to have some discussion, I was going to propose some ideas that you might want to consider based on those comments.
Let's hear it.
Okay, why don't I do a quick share screen? It might just be easier than trying to explain what I'm talking about. Let's see here. Hopefully you can see this right here. So one of the things they were talking about in those comments was essentially somebody who has an LSSP, who's currently licensed as an LSSP, and they're wanting to apply for an LPA. And so there's two suggestions. I think G1 is right here in front of you. And so currently what we have is there's they can remediate if they have at least 60 semester credit hours. But one of the issues is the LSSP rule does require 60 semester credit hours, but they can get, if they don't have 60 hours, they can get additional coursework after the conferral of the degree. And so what would happen is if we didn't add this highlighted part, this is currently licensed as an LSSP as an additional option, there may be people that can get licensed as an LSSP, but because their degree program wasn't 60 hours, they wouldn't be able to remediate. The other part about it, where it talks about subsection F, that's going to talk about people that began their degree program prior to 2019. So this was just a suggestion I thought of just to in response to the comments to say that, you know, my general understanding is kind of some of these changes are being proposed so that those people that are licensed in LSSP may have a possible pathway to become licensed. And so I think this in G1 that's highlighted on the screen, hopefully you can see that, right?
Yes.
That would be a potential change that we could possibly adopt in response to comments. The other change was a lot of the comments talked about the supervised experience. And so when we proposed this, we had supervised under an LSSP and that's duly licensed as an LSP and an LPA. And I think a lot of the comments essentially were talking about they wanted to have an option where it would be licensed under their comments were supervision under an LSSP, an LPA, or an LSSP, an LP, an LPA, or an LSSP, not a duly licensed individual. I don't think you're really going to have an instance where it's just solely under an LPA. You would have something where an LSSP came in and they had supervision under an LSSP and possibly an LP. But I think this change, I don't know if I'm explaining this correctly, but I think this change where you take out the LPA and just somebody who's licensed in LSSP would possibly help aid in that an LSSP being able to apply for an LPA. If that
Can I ask a question though?
Yeah.
How is it that you would assume that someone who is not trained as an LPA would have the ability to supervise someone to become an LPA?
I had the same question. Like, is it a situation where how does an LS, because you're saying individual holds an LSSP, how does an LSSP supervisor beget an LPA?
Okay, well,
Correct, because they don't have the degree for which they're getting licensed. So that was the point of them being duly licensed and being able to supervise that, right?
And LSSPs they're independent practice, you know, they practice independently, not in schools. So that, I don't know,
That's the point of the dual licensure.
The first change I kind of got. That second one, I'm trying to understand.
Yeah,
I think don't forget.
I have a thought to consider. We have students who go for LPA and also for LSSP, and they do our same master's program in counseling psychology. And for LSSP, they have to take a few other courses in education department. And so I don't see that LSSP cannot be an LPA. It's not that much of a different training.
I don't
Daryl,
think
you were
anybody's
gonna,
saying that an LSSP can't be an LPA, but in terms of the supervision for the LPA, if it's an LSSP only, that's not an LPA. And then that would be, or like if it's an LP, that's an LSSP, it's fine. Or I think that's where the debate comes in.
Daryl was gonna say, don't forget something, and then we started talking.
Yeah, I think most of you are, you're jumping from, you're making the assumption that, okay, when they get the LPA, you're automatically assuming, oh, they're going to be practicing independently. Remember that supervision we're talking about here is for the 6 hours within the graduate degree program. Now, if you give them, if somebody is supervised only by an LSSP, when they come out with the LPA, they are going to be under supervision, and they will be under supervision for at least 3,000 hours and 2 years.
Okay.
After that, that's why we're kind of thinking that's probably safe to do it, because you're going to have at least 2 years and 3,000 hours worth of supervised practice under an LP before you can then move on to independent practice.
That answers my question.
Yeah, that you would essentially make them have to go back to school, enroll in some sort of course and get supervision under one of those licensees, and then get the license and then go under the 3,000 hours of supervised experience. So you get extra, you would be increasing that, I guess.
But to be fair, and on both Dr. Becker and Dr. Carter are right in that I don't know that I could say that LSSPs and LPAs are trained the same way in a graduate training program, just based off what I know. That ain't saying much, but if it wasn't for the fact that they were under supervision after we gave them the license, I probably would say, no, don't do that. But the fact that they are, I'm like, if there's a problem, your supervisor's gonna straighten you out, or he's gonna fire you or drop you.
And Donnie has his hand up. Hang on, Doctor. Hang on, Doctor.
Go ahead, Dr. Singh.
Okay.
Their internships differ. That's where but many of the courses they take are the same, can be the same. And so, I have students who are both LPA and LSSP, former students. And some of them have gone and gotten the other LPAs have gotten the LSSP, and they're practicing fine. And I don't think it's such a big problem, because the internship hours, like Mr. Spinks is saying, for each is quite a few. I mean, a lot of work to take a postmaster's internship supervision. So I don't think we're endangering anybody here.
Mr. Seguros?
I happen to be duly licensed. I became duly licensed because of the grandfathering issue back in '97. I was not trained as an LSSP. I do not agree with Dr. Singh that the training of an LPA and an LSSP is the same. I believe there's certain federal regulations. There's a lot of school information. There's a lot of ARD that meets federal 94-142 rules that have to be abided by. I did not learn those. I was grandfathered into this. My job was as a clinical psychologist with the school because of the demands. I learned, but going back to my previous comments, I learned to be an LSSP on the job. I became competent as an LSSP only because I started doing LSSP work. At 9 a.m., I see a suicidal student. At 11 o'clock, I had to block off 3 hours because I was going to do an autism evaluation. So I started becoming the LSSP. Was I able to learn that? Sure. I worked over 25 years doing it. Without assuming anything, I believe Dr. Cartwright has an LSSP. He also probably was grandfathered in because he was able to say that he was working with school-age children. So I think we need to get in our minds that competency is an issue. Now, the main issue here is should we have an LPA supervising an LSSP or vice versa, having an LSSP supervising an LPA? No, I don't think so. I think if we're going to have that supervision, I agree with the public comments that we need to have a person dually licensed in order to supervise that particular credential. However, the dual licensed LPA is a dying thing, just like Dr. Singh said. Even the LPA appears to be an extinct position. If we require the dual license, which I think is a good idea, I do have another recommendation, by the way, but if we do require the dual license, then you're basically going to have, who's going to do this? I turn down 15, 20 phone calls a day trying to get me to go to Maryland to work because there's not enough LSSPs out there. So with regards to Ashley Arnold's point of view, that the LSSPs are doing all this stuff. No, they're not. That's why we have a gap in mental health services in schools. And I'm not trying to put down LSSPs. They're able to do the work. Do they have the time? Do they have the skills? They don't deal. I supervise 8 people from Trinity University. Okay, keep in mind, I'm one of these guys with a dual license that wasn't trained as an LSSP. And I was going over all of these federal regulations, and they said, and people from Trinity, in case you don't know, they're above average graduates. So I really didn't have a whole lot of training as an LSSP to do with these guys, these people. They said, no, Mr. Andoni, we don't want you to train us in LSSP work. We already know all that stuff. Can we sit in with you while you deal with somebody cutting on their arms? And so they wanted the clinical psychology stuff, which the LSSP does not get rather. And I see Dr. Becker having her hand up. I don't want to hog the show. I don't know if I answered this rule that we're trying to do. I believe if we're going to have an LPA supervising an LSSP without, it's just not going to work. But I am an example of somebody who learned how to be an LSSP by doing it. Is it a good idea? Probably not.
Dr. Becker?
I totally hear the learn by doing. I was one of those too. I think my question is really, I trained in a different state, so I am completely unfamiliar to the training of LSSPs and LPAs. They didn't have them in the state that I trained in. So this I learned coming into Texas. So for me, my question is really to the point of, we don't necessarily cross-pollinate for supervision, even when there's overlap in training. So at the level of licensure, social workers, even though there's overlap in the degree and the training, social workers and psychologists can't supervise each other's hours per se and be counted. In some situations you can, but it's typically postgraduate. So the question for me is, what part of the training is this in? And for the LPA and the LSSP, is there enough relevant training for that person to be able to do what it is that they're asking to do? And I genuinely don't know the answer to this. And so when you're talking about supervision, to me, you have to have had the training and the background. And if you're talking about licensure as an LPA, to me, there's a gap in training if you're saying that an LSSP is going to supervise to the licensure of something other than their degree. I supervise LCSWs all day long from a clinical perspective, but it's not necessarily towards their licensure. That has to be done by a social worker. And so I think just being very clear and direct about the question that we're asking and what it is that we're sort of directing that to That's, I guess, what I'm asking about.
So you're
Because
Daryl.
I don't understand the training well enough.
Dr. Becker hits on something that I don't want to say it's a peeve of mine, but it's something I've always been a little frustrated, I guess, with all the professions about. Dr. Becker, you can supervise LPCs, MFTs, you can supervise the whole gambit. Are you I mean, do you feel like you know what you're doing when you do it? I'll answer for you. You do.
But I can't log that with the state.
I know, but that's the whole point. What we're getting at here is, does that make any sense?
Okay,
It
this
doesn't.
Can I chime in here? This was literally like a whole segment of my talk at ASPPB. Ask why. Ask why 5 times, and we get to the root of things.
And I will answer that because in this forum, I think it's relevant. We're different professions, okay? There is training that is specific to social work that I don't have because there are whole aspects of social work that I am not privy and relevant to. I'm really not. And the same is true of counseling. Okay, I know and understand psychology because that is what I have been trained, but it is a separate profession and there is autonomy in our professions. If you guys look at this as a Venn diagram, if we are being respectful and cognizant of one another, there is a ton of overlap in what we do, but they are not the same profession. Okay, and we have a respectful autonomy of each other and recognizing there's a lot of overlap in our clinical skills, but there's a whole lot that we all do that are separate from one another. So having the value of professionals that supervise you in your training is essential to being able to understand what you contribute versus what somebody else contributes and how you overlap and contribute together. So I am very strong in understanding. I think there is a role in cross-pollination, but I also think that there is a relevance in your training to supervision in your profession. And I don't know that from a licensing perspective that there isn't room for both, but there might have to be some cognizance of how much of that. But that may be a different discussion. I think here my question is how much of an overlap from the LSSP and the LPA question is relevant to their ability in this question to answer what it is that we're asking them to do.
I have a question in a minute, but I think, did Tim have his hand up first?
Yes, thanks. I want to provide a little bit of context on the why question that you have. My understanding is that the why for the silos in regard to supervision was based upon if you have a bad supervisor, you can't discipline them if they're not one of your licensees. And so with BHEC, that becomes a different story, keep in mind, but this stuff is from before that. So if you're an LPC and you're being supervised by you're being supervised by somebody in another profession, like let's say a doctor, a psychiatrist, as it were, the board would not be able to take action upon that supervisor. They would have to refer it to another board and hope that that board did something. So that's one of the big reasons why there are requirements for a specific profession, a specific type of professional within each board, from my understanding. So, and I will use.
All these requirements are quite, they were not there for a few years ago. Psychiatrists, psychologists could supervise, people that weren't trained in their profession, and they were doing it all the time. Like our students go through the same program, and some go in LPA direction, another, not too many, mostly they want to go LPC direction, and some go and take some extra courses in education, and then they go for LSSP. But there, some LPAs work with kids, maybe not in school system, but they work in places like MHMR facilities or other facilities, and it's not. So Dr. Becker made a very good point. I know some social workers are doing exactly what psychologists are doing, other than few exceptions that they can do. But there is so much overlap in the helping professions right now that a lot of same kind of stuff is being taught, same kind of requirements are being given. My question is, this came, how did this question come about? Somebody's requesting this, or how, Mr. Hyde, how did this all start? Mr. Hyde?
Yeah, go, Patrick.
The rule, like why are we looking at this rule? I think
Yes.
this was brought up a couple board meetings ago, Mr. Chair, if I'm remembering correctly, where we were looking at, what rule changes we might look to make to, I don't know, help increase services in other areas, and especially with schools. And I mean, it was kind of a broad stroke, approach.
Yeah, it was a how do we build a wider on-ramp to the profession?
I get it.
Yeah. Mr. Hyde, did you have something else? You had your hand up a minute ago in the middle of the rest of that. Did you have more?
Yeah, I was just going to add, this is just kind of throw this idea out there. So part of one of the things to look at in A2, which is essentially the supervised experience in order to obtain just the licensure, and then you for an LPA, and then you would still have to be under supervision for 3.
Sorry, tell us where you are again.
So the part we're kind of debating in A2, where it's talking about it requires supervision under 6 semester credit hours under a licensed psychologist currently for an LPA. And so one of the things under that rule right now is if an LSSP that's currently licensed, they're all required to do their internship. And if they did that internship in a school district under a supervisor that is an LSSP and an LP, that would more than likely be more than 6 semester credit hours, and that would qualify under this rule currently as written. So whether or not the supervision and the experience is all going to be in a school district, it's not going to be in a private practice setting. So I don't think there's going to be a focus on LPA, but that currently does meet the requirements. And so what all the other LSSPs that had the same supervised experience, but their supervisor is not also an LP, but is just an LSSP, are not going to be able to count that under this A2 requirement for 6 semester credit hours. So I just look at it at putting people on equal footing, and then they still have to get supervision as an LPA for 3,000 hours under an LP going forward. That's the apples to apples comparison, I think, for why you would have just an LSSP and not just somebody who's an LSSP and an LPA as your supervisor.
So let me restate this real quick just to make it, because again, looking at this on A2 on its own, like I was asking the same question as Dr. Becker was in the first place. Again, this is just for this practicum internship within their graduate degree program. It can be, as proposed here, LSSP. And did you have an edit to make it and or? Was this how we're?
Do you want me to do the share screen again?
Yeah, because that was because your edits were in response to the comments.
Correct. And it was right
Okay.
here was currently it has the LSSP and the LPA, and so the option would be in response to comments is to make it an LP or supervision under an LSSP, so that both would potentially count.
Okay, so just for the terms of just for the benefit of the board here, assume for a minute, guys, like this is what was before us. So if it was passed on in this way, it's under the supervision individual holds an LSSP. So it's not even or, it's just an LSSP, correct?
I mean, that would, if you're taking
Yes.
out the highlighted
Okay,
language, yeah.
and then go down, scroll down,
To which part?
keep going, next page, I think. But okay, right there, stop. Go, 2, in the middle of the page there. Nope. Or no, sorry, that's it. That's right. Supervision requirements. This on C2A. And that supervision, once they get past that, they've got to do 3,000 hours under an LP.
Correct. And before they can get independent practice status.
Yeah.
correct.
And it's already been, I heard Dr. Singh talk about it in terms of the overlap and similarity and the actual things that a lot of these different licensees are doing in these settings are, for most intents and purposes, the same. But with the concern being an LSSP cannot mint an LPA, they're really not, because they're working for 3,000 hours under an LP.
They would currently have the license, they would just be required to be under supervision of an.
Right. They still have we still have the bumpers, the guardrails of an LP for 3,000 hours supervising their work. Correct?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Correct. I'll tell you a very practical thing too that may keep them under supervision even beyond the 3,000 hours. And well, Herman's not here, and Tony, you might be able to deal. One of the things I've been looking at is why the LPA numbers aren't growing. And in talking with some licensees, a lot of what I'm hearing is it's an insurance reimbursement issue. I think insurance companies are not wanting to reimburse LPAs who are practicing independently. They will only reimburse them if they are practicing under the supervision of a psychologist. And so if you can't get insurance or you can't get paid practicing independently, that's going to naturally keep you under the supervision. So I know that's something that probably y'all don't want to rely on as a regulatory tool or anything, but anyway, just keep that in mind.
As a practical matter, that's important.
Yeah.
It's not going to be a major future problem because we hardly get anybody who wants to go to be LPA. Most everybody wants to go if they don't want to go to LP, they want to go to LPC or LSSP if they were going to work for the school system.
And yeah, and that highlights the problem we're trying to fix here. We're trying to get more LPAs. Indoni.
I'm gonna keep my mouth shut.
Okay. You sure?
I think I've already offended enough people with my comments. The reason why we don't have any LPAs is because of legislative control by TPA. They have passed enough information out that LPAs are not credible, we're not competent, we're not able to work, we're not able to do this, we can't even go to the bathroom by ourselves. And so the LPA has no future. I'm sad to say that, but at the same time, I don't know how to fix that. I do know, I did mention earlier that I did have I guess some sort of a solution to this dual licensure thing. Right now, the LPAs can contract with school districts. They're not able to get a full contract just like an LSSP. So they can contract like on a 1099 basis where you get paid, you don't have any benefits, you don't have anything like that. So if we were able to manipulate that to where there was a position created within the school to deal with these problems that exist, because I am totally against giving LSSPs more responsibility. They can't even do what their job description says. And Miss Arnold, with all due respect, and I love her approach, but she was trying to get more work for doing more for getting more work to be done by LSSPs when there's no time to do that. Keep in mind, I mentioned it at the special meeting, LSSPs generally work with less than 10% of the school population. That leaves 90% of the kids with nothing. Now, there are school districts like Fort Worth and Dallas, bigger towns that do hire LSSPs that have clinical background to do their mental health work. But I mean, that isn't Muleshoe, Texas, okay? That's big towns. And so it's civilization, sort of. So we have an issue there. I do believe that if we, Dr. Becker said that this dual licensure thing would be a way of getting a pathway for LPAs out there that aren't productive to maybe get back into the system because they have a place. But giving the responsibility of LPA work to LSSPs is only because it's necessary to do so. Not because it's a good idea.
Thank you, Mr. Zagouras. We're gonna need, I assume we need action on this. I feel like again, I shared Dr. Becker's concerns at the outset of this. With the supervision, 3,000 hours of supervision by an LP, I feel pretty confident that you're gonna have adequate supervision there.
Let me throw something out there if y'all are uncomfortable with this. You could just say, okay, we want to incorporate the changes that, like what Patrick has talked about, and say republish it. Let's republish it with these changes and let's see what the public says again. You don't have to send this up to the board or the council right now. And just judging by the way, the kind of the hesitancy here, that's kind of where I'm leaning. I'd recommend that y'all do is just because you're not married to it. If it comes back and you don't like it, you don't have to do it. It doesn't cost anything and it doesn't hurt anything.
And I mean, candidly, like this came out of our special meeting where we rolled up our sleeves and got a little messy. And, you know, I was pretty clear that I thought we'd bump into things and probably find some bad ideas that need tweaking and reworking. And I would not be opposed to, because changing this the way that it's being suggested to be changed, I would like to hear some feedback as well. I think it accomplishes the goal, but I wouldn't mind hearing feedback on it and just taking one more meeting cycle on it.
I like the changes, and I don't think this is a bad idea. I know you use that word, but I don't think this is a bad idea. I think it helps us capitalize on the assets we have available, because I think maybe we're underutilizing some of our assets, and it does it, I think, without an increased risk to the public because they're still under supervision of an LP. But I get the concerns from the LP community too. So let's float it. Let us write the changes up. Let's float it again. And then let's see what people say.
Is there any objection to that?
No.
Without objection, let's do that.
Okay, we'll do that.
Okay. Perfect. Thank you guys for that discussion. That is exactly how this is supposed to go. We're gonna go to 463.9.
Daryl, do we need a motion though to withdraw the previous proposal and repropose?
No, we just did it without objection. There was no objection. So
Okay.
you're good.
Yeah. Patrick, we'll draw up the revised version, take it to the council meeting, and they'll repropose it.
Patrick, you don't have any changes here, correct?
I don't think so. Sorry, one quick second.
Sorry, 463.9.
We did get one comment, but I don't know that there was any particular changes that I saw that I was going to recommend to you guys.
Is there any discussion on this one? Dale or Patrick, do you guys want to expound on any the implications of this?
This is our certificate pathway, right?
Appropriate graduate degrees.
Yeah.
NCSP certification.
It's kind of modeled after the tech program.
Yeah.
Patrick, isn't that right?
That's right.
So this is the one. Go ahead.
I'm kind of surprised that nobody has commented on this.
Maybe it's such a great idea.
Well, okay. I wish people would chime in a little bit more and either say the idea sucks, it's great. I mean, just give us some kind of indication here, folks. We're putting it out there, asking y'all what you think. Kind of tell us.
Yeah, because this is the way essentially you go back without going back to a whole brand new master's degree.
Yeah.
To me, this is kind of like one of the biggest, like, and kind of my favorite change that we're talking about here that could actually make a big difference. So yeah, I'm with you. I wish that we had some comment on it.
I like the idea. I think it's a good concept.
We can still move it forward, and people can, I mean, at the BHEC level, maybe people will comment on it there.
Why don't we, why doesn't someone just kind of spell out what these changes are exactly and kind of and just explain it so the public can hear it?
Okay. Basically right now, if you're going to be an LSSP, you've got to have a graduate degree in psychology. And what the concern was, again, we were in trying to figure out how can we increase the number of providers. We had 2 LSSPs in Uvalde, and that is very typical for a lot of rural and non-urban Texas. And I mean, honestly, with the shortages in the urban areas too, I don't want to make it sound like they're flush with providers, because they're not. So what we're trying to do is figure out, how do we increase those numbers, given the fact that we know we can't pump out enough from our own programs. The studies tell us that we can't import our way out of the problem. So what does that tell us? If we can't draw enough water out of our own well and our neighbor's well, we got to start looking at maybe different types of water sources. And so what we were looking at is, okay, what if you come in with a degree in childhood development or some sort of related field? I don't know what it would be off the top of my head. I'm drawing a blank, but you were close to the profession, but it just wasn't a psychology degree. But Tech has a program, and I'm not endorsing Tech particularly, but they have a program where they can take somebody who's close, they're just not there, and they can fill in those gaps and say, all right, now we've put in the missing bricks. Here's your certificate. You are now competent. You are now qualified to deliver school psych services. Without this rule, we can't accept those individuals. With this rule, we can. And we have the statutory flexibility to do this for LSSPs and like LPAs. We don't have this flexibility for LPs, but the ledge gave us the flexibility to do it for the LSSP. And so we're kind of maximizing our statutory authority. We're trying to cast a broader net on qualified individuals, and we're being proactive in filling in any training gaps that they have by making them go through one of these types of programs. So
it's maximizing human capital with the idea of saying, you don't have to go back to start. You just have to fill in the missing things. Because somebody with, a counseling degree or master's in counseling, like, may not have, I mean, it's not under the rule, sorry, go get a psychology degree.
They're already paying off their first student loan debt. They're not going to go get another one to help us fill in this gap. So
to me, like, this is the idea of, we're balancing like regulatory demands with workforce demands. This is not just lowering a bar to let more people in. This is saying, okay, why? And then figuring out how do we right size and figure out the gaps that actually need filling in.
The bar is the same. It's just in a different location really here, I think.
It seems like it provides a reasonable pathway to remediation, which we haven't had previously.
Exactly.
Which I really like, because it doesn't do it by lowering the standard. It changes the pathway to the same standard, which to me is a creative way to get to the same place. Which I have to say, in this forum, I like, because heretofore we've spent a lot of time talking about lowering standards, which drives me up a wall. So this one actually seems like we are just looking at a different way of getting to the same standard, as opposed to lowering a standard, which I'm all for.
I want the record.
I absolutely agree.
To.
Oh, go ahead.
In some
I
cases,
just want the record to reflect that Dr. Becker used the word heretofore. She is automatically on the jurisprudence exam committee because of that.
in some cases, they actually, with this detour, they actually take a lot more courses, and they actually become even better skilled. That's how our students, they take courses in education, and they don't need to go for their master's degree, but they take extra courses, then they go for LSSP. Going the different path, so to say, actually is a longer path and actually gives them more training.
So with the tech model that you're speaking of, how does that work then? Do they have someone who's sort of like validating coursework and then, ensuring that like, you're meeting, all right, well, you need to take your research design class, you need to take your, statistics here, or your assessment classes here, or counseling classes here? Is that like, is there a way of doing that? And like from a state level, licensure level, would that be like, how would you foresee that happening?
Well, when you look at the tech model, they actually will only admit people with psych degrees into that certificate program. Psych degrees, is for whatever reason, I don't remember why, but don't qualify for the school psych route. Now, you may say, well, okay, well, Daryl, what is this actually going to get us then if the certificate programs don't exist? Well, my bounce back to that would be they don't exist because heretofore we've never had a pathway that would allow them to exist. And so now we're kind of busting the market open on this. And now maybe people are going to start thinking, okay, maybe we don't have to limit this to psych degrees. Because honestly, somebody could say, we were the bottleneck before. We were the reason that they hadn't created this certificate or expanded it to its maximum potential. Now they can't say that.
And Daryl, what you're highlighting here is what I said at that meeting. I said, if we own 5% of this problem, we're going to own it. Like that part of it. And so I feel like that's what you're kind of very eloquently stating there.
I think to Dr. Cartwright's point, I think that what you have by doing this is a pathway almost like to what they have in medicine, which is a post-baccalaureate program system. So folks that are looking like to take the MCAT exam can go back and do like a 1 or 2 year program that gives them all of the coursework that they need to take that exam. So essentially, I think if you give them the pathway through the licensure, you'll have programs and invested schools that will then build out almost like a post-bac program that will get them to this certification program. So I think that basically once we give the pathway through the licensure, then you find your partners in education to build out the programming for it.
Yeah, I absolutely agree. And I mean, you'd have essentially like respecialization programs, or I don't know what you want to call it, but where you would be able to pick up the coursework you needed to give you the competency needed in the field. And it would definitely allow more opportunity. I mean, to Dr. Zagoras' point, I mean, I get emails every day about LSSP opportunity and, let alone all over Texas, but like in Oregon and Washington and Ohio, wherever it might be. And there's a massive shortage, and it does get more providers back into schools, into that, and where we have access to children and children that need it that aren't getting services. And like he was saying, like 90% don't get any services, and it would allow more opportunity there, and some folks that may have some other expertise, maybe more in counseling or in some of the areas that LSSPs typically aren't like. It's not there. I mean, some programs may have strong counseling focus, but a lot of them do not. And so I think it sounds like a good idea. Again, with those programs, then like certifying that they do meet all of the main criteria needed for the LSSP. And a lot of that is education based. So there's a lot of coursework in the education realm, federal law, state law, just a lot of things that are just completely like separate from typical clinical programs. So, but I do think we're on the right path, and I'm glad that this has been brought to the table.
Any motions?
I move that we accept.
I'm sorry, but Dr. Lambden had her hand up. Did you have more comment, Dr. Lambden?
No, I was just basically going to validate what Dr. Becker and what Dr. Cartwright had said. I'm like Dr. Becker. I'm not so much about lowering the standards, but certainly a pathway that can kind of widen the net a little bit, where we can get people on board and give them the training, a pathway to get them trained up to where we need them to be, so that the demand can be filled in a way that's appropriate. I'm behind that.
Yeah, and I just gotta tell you guys, like what you just said, Dr. Landon, like that whole, and Dr. Becker as well, like that ethos was really a lot what was being talked about kind of in the abstract at ASPPB. And I mean, these conversations are happening nationally. This is a rubber hits the road moment that I'm proud of the work that we're doing here on this. So I mentioned this idea up there, and I saw a couple of like raised eyebrows and nodding heads who hadn't quite thought of, you know, how to do this. So yeah, I appreciate y'all's thoughts on that. Dr. Singh, okay, so the motion was passage by Dr. Singh. Is there a second?
I second the motion.
And seconded. Is there any further discussion? Hearing none, all in favor signify by saying aye.
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 Any opposed, say no. Thank you very much. Moving on to 46310. I think we're sort of doing this one. This is more of a cleanup, if I'm correct. Is that right, Daryl or Patrick?
Yeah, they're moving part of what's in 10 to a new rule in 15, and it's for degrees that were issued in 1979 or older.
Do this one and 463.15 together, because
Right.
they're the cleanup rules.
I'll bungle the explanation of this, but essentially, Daryl, this is one of these things that this whole thing like confuses everybody because it's in here,
Yes.
and it's a super outdated thing that we can't get rid of, but it doesn't belong here. So we're just taking it out and putting it in a separate place in the code to
Correct. Put it
Yeah.
on a shelf to collect dust
yeah.
where nobody else will look to get confused by it.
Yeah. So are there any questions on this, guys and gals, ladies and gentlemen? So it would be move adoption of 46310 and 46315 as proposed, if that's anybody's desire.
I can do it.
Thank you, Dr. Singh.
I'll second.
So moved and seconded. Any discussion? All in favor signify by saying aye.
Right?
Aye.
Any opposed, say no. The ayes have it. Thank you very much. All right, so going to 46312, temporary licensure. Daryl, or Patrick, Daryl, will one of you guys explain this one?
Yeah, this is to help Diane not have to track every single time somebody wants to use one of the 30 days that's
That's right.
authorized. And so we looked at what SciPac did for their TAPs, where they do a counting of 30 days. And this is essentially modeled after that, where they need to either tell us once they're done with it and just report those 30 days that they've used, or upon the expiration of the 1 year, tell us which days they used. But we don't have them having to contact us before each day, 24 hours before each day that they use, get pre-approval of that time, and then they have to contact us again and say, oops, I couldn't use that time, please take that off the calendar. I'll speak for Diane. I don't think it's a fun process for her to have to do, but yeah, I think this is possibly a smarter way of doing it.
Does
I have a question on that real quick.
Okay, go ahead.
So just to clarify that, it's just 30, you're given 30 days. They're not consecutive days though. Like it can be June 1st and then August 28th, and then it could be
Correct.
so on and so forth.
Correct.
Okay.
You do not want consecutive days, because the forensic practitioners that use this, they'll just kill you with their schedule. And it's part of my profession's fault. We cancel depositions, cancel hearings, and tell you all about it the day before.
Any further questions or discussion? Are there any motions before the board?
Let's go with it, with my name.
Been moved by Dr. Singh,
Seconded.
seconded by Dr. Lambden. All in favor signify by saying aye.
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 All opposed, say no. The ayes have it. Thank you very much. And we are on to professional development. Patrick, I think you have some non-substantive changes that maybe we need to talk about. Is that correct?
Right. One of the things that all the other boards are doing is they're adding to the list of the where it says you must obtain at least 50% of their professional development hours from one of the listed providers in the rule. One of the things they're adding to that is a phrase, and I can share screen real quickly. It might just be easier to do that. But they're adding hospitals and hospital systems right here where it says a hospital or hospital system, including any clinic, division, department within a hospital or hospital system. They're adding that to what would be E. And so all the other boards are currently, I believe, approved to propose these changes. I don't know that or add to their rules that may have been adopted with this. In my mind, and Daryl, you can chime in if you disagree, that's in line with essentially the thinking of all these other organizations that are listed in this rule. And so we were looking to probably adopt with the change to make this easier for licensees to comply with for this particular thing. The other thing to mention too is also in the packet is the office of the governor's office, the regulatory compliance division did issue their letter yesterday. It should be, I believe it is in your board materials, and they reviewed the proposal and they did not have any issues with it, and they did not find it to be anti-competitive or beyond our ability to adopt.
And so this is a repeal and replace, correct?
Of the current rule, yeah, correct.
Is there any other discussion? And we can move repeal and move adoption with your changes as non-substantive changes.
Correct.
I move to make those changes.
It's been moved. And does your motion include the repeal?
Yes, it does.
Okay, so it's been moved to repeal, replace with Patrick's edits to add the
I'll second.
hospitals. It's been, I'm sorry, who had the second?
I
Dr.
second.
Becker. All in favor, any further discussion? All in favor signify by saying aye.
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 Any opposed, say no. The ayes have it. Thank you very much. And if I'm not mistaken, that concludes rulemaking. Moving on to, again, thank you everybody for attention and discussion there on all those items. Insights over lunch, dates and topics. Daryl, this is your wheelhouse usually, is it not?
Not this time.
Who is it now?
Well, I think what I handle it at the council level. I think what the boards are doing is they're putting together panels to give lunch hour presentations, board members. Y'all figure out if y'all want to do that, what you want to talk about.
Yeah, so if a non-quorum of board members want to get together and talk about initiatives or things we're doing.
Yeah.
I feel like we talked about this, but my brain is foggy right now. Did we have any sort of topics that we felt, needed that kind of attention right now specifically?
I think the key was to kind of keep it board related. I think there was some tangent there that we could get off tangent and start talking about issues that aren't pertain to the board, that don't pertain to the board. But I think there's a lot of topics we could talk about from licensure standpoint, from just all the things that we do. I'm sure we could come up with some really good discussion.
EPPP2 immediately to me comes to mind. That's probably the hottest potato.
That could be a great start.
All the stuff y'all have been doing, all the rule reviewing you've been doing to see what can we do to maximize our provider potential.
Yeah.
That kind of thing.
Between EPPP2 and a couple of these rules we've even worked on today, those are, to me, easy topics, unless somebody has other ideas.
I'll tell you the downside to doing these things, whoever does it, it's a little bit of work.
Well, also you're going to be making public statements that they can be taken as as sanctions for doing certain things. If you can say something that maybe held against, maybe for her.
I'm not as, it's a fair concern, Dr. Singh. I'm pretty, we're gonna be pretty clear that any statements made are gonna be the opinions of the individual board members and not the board. It's gonna be a non-quorum group. I think probably no more than 3 of us. You could technically get 4 of us, but I feel like 2 to 3 of us. And we'll be very clear that these are our individual opinions and insights. Is this something we want to do in the spring? Or, I mean, the holidays are coming up. Daryl, what is the schedule? What are other people doing?
MFT just did one. I think not. Tim, help me out here. LPC's got one coming up, or they just did one. I'm sorry. LPC's just did one. MFTs have done one. Social work, I can't remember what they're doing. I need to do another one for BHEC. I just haven't had time to do it. I may put one together for December. In
What are
BHEC.
typically the topics?
On the BHEC stuff, I always talk about the rules, the various rules that are coming up, because a lot of times people will attend these things, and then you can at least tip them off, hey, this rule change happened, or this one's in the pipes, and they'll never hear about it otherwise. They won't read it or know about it. So I use it as an education opportunity there. And then I recommend that y'all do this. It's usually it's well received. You open yourself up to questions, leave a certain amount of time and let them ask anything they want to ask, as long as it's not about a pending complaint or a pending application. It's just fair game. That way they can ask you, get your perspective on it, what you see as a trend or an issue, that type of thing.
I'll volunteer for the dunking booth.
How much attendance do you get? I attended some of your that you presented, Mr. Spike.
BHEC usually draws a couple hundred, 300 to 400 people on the
How much
BHEC
of the
level.
other boards are going?
MFTs, it may vary, 10, 12. LPCs had 300 and something the other day. I can't remember if social work's even done one yet. I just can't remember on them, but it varies, by the size of the profession and the interest sometimes of what you're talking about. If you've got a particularly controversial rule or something on there, that'll draw a lot of attention. I need to do one on the continuing education changes that are happening, which won't be a big shock to Psych, because it's basically y'all's rule, just beefed up a little bit in certain areas. But the other professions, it's a watershed change for them. So I need to do that for them.
Is this something, I feel like it almost at this point, it would be better to set something for January and not try to do something over the holidays.
Don't do it in January, because you got a meeting in January.
Okay,
And that's the kickoff to the legislative session.
that's true.
Doesn't affect really y'all or licensees probably all that much.
I'm afraid I'm not opposed to doing it in December, except for the fact that just feels like a short fuse, and with everything else going on, I don't know. And for the topics that I feel like, if we're gonna talk about EBBB2, I'd rather give that the time and runway it needs for people to, hey, we're gonna have a informal discussion about this. Want to hear
What about sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt you. What about right after the next board meeting, next Psych board meeting?
Like February?
Yeah, because holidays are going to be tough. I know they'd be tough for me, but
I was going to make the same suggestion, just because, we've got the holidays coming up, but then also you get past the kickoff for the legislative session. February might not be a bad idea.
And you get some fresh ideas off the next meeting as well.
Do I think February?
You may have some more ideas to talk about once you start seeing the bills filed, which
That's
I think starts next week. I think early bill filing starts next week. So
sure. Let's plan on February. If there's any objection there, Daryl or Diane, you guys have the calendars. Do we need a motion to set a date, or can we just give you the leeway to set a date that works in February?
You don't need any formal action on this. Y'all can just agree to do it.
Okay.
Any volunteers? So they just figure out who you want on it, who's gonna do it.
I think Mr. Hyde should be there to keep everybody straight so they don't say something that isn't true.
I totally agree, Dr. Singh. I think he should be there.
He should be watching, be the referee.
Hey, Patrick, how does that speed bump feel?
It was cutting out. I didn't hear anything. Bad internet connection.
I tell you, what, let's do this. Diane, will you please get us some dates that work, and then without we're not going to do a group email or anything else like that. Diane can solicit volunteers to see whose schedules that works with, and we'll figure that out of who's going to do it.
Yeah, and I tentatively, I should be able to do it. So
Okay.
I mean, I'll volunteer unless something comes up, you know.
All right,
Crazy.
Dr. Lambden.
Yeah, I just had a question, or I guess to confirm, are we for sure doing the EPPP, or is that just one of the topics under discussion?
That's only off the top of my head. What you got? We're taking ideas. What do you got?
Well, like you said, we might really kind of watch closely some of the rules, or not rules, some of the bills being filed or considered and coming up on this legislative session, and just some things that might come up. I think there's just so much information, really. I myself feel like if I went ahead and volunteered, I would need really to get myself up to speed. I think Dr. Becker brought up some great points about, given the structure of what's being proposed for the, overhaul to the EPPP Part 1, it would definitely change some of the programs, or, would have an impact on some of the training programs. So I think there's a lot of information to kind of really get myself up to speed before I could really make a valuable or semi-valuable contribution. I'm
going to argue with you just a little bit there. And it actually, I am going to argue with you based on a couple of discussions I had at ASPPB. And
you're going to convince me, John?
I don't know if I'm going to convince you. I'm just going to tell you what some other boards and board members I talked to up at ASPPB talked about really candidly and off the record. I think a lot of, there's a dynamic in these meetings because they're public, and this is all recorded for posterity. And, if any of us say something boneheaded, it's there for forever. And that's I think goes through all of our mind, whether we all admit that or not. It certainly goes through my mind, especially as not a PhD here. It's easy to look dumb, and it crosses my mind. That dynamic, though, has a chilling effect on solutions. And so in these things, I would say, yeah, obviously we need to do our homework and come prepared. We don't need to go into this thing with all the answers. It's going to hopefully be a roll up our sleeves dialogue, especially with the ask me anything part. Like, that's awesome. Like, and if we get stumped, like, God bless us. Like, that means that we're on the cutting edge and on a frontier of figuring out something we didn't before. So yeah, obviously let's come in as prepared as possible. But one of these board administrators I was talking to, and I was like, yeah, just tell people to not be afraid to not have the answer. And to me, that's the whole ethos that I would want to bring to this kind of discussion.
I'm certainly open to that. That would be no stretch on my part. I certainly don't have the answers, and I can certainly be humble enough to say, yeah, I don't have the answers, but I'm certainly willing to roll up my sleeves and help.
Yeah.
Well, Mr. Hyde will have all the answers.
You can take comfort, Dr. Lambden, in knowing most of the problems that bubble up to this level, nobody's had the answer for until it hits this level. And you got to be perfectly comfortable saying, I don't know. We're going to have to feel our way through it.
Well, I may regret this later, but yes, put me on the list if you're still needing people to get on there and do the lunch session. I'm willing to do it.
Sounds good. All right, Ms. Moore, let's work on some dates for that so we can confirm availability and go from there. And the agenda for that can be loose. It can be EPPP. It can be Ask Me Anything. We'll leave a space for legislative discussions. Obviously, this is the other thing too. I mean, we can even have opinions on legislation as long as it's in our individual capacities, and as long as we're very clear that the board is not advocating for or against legislative proposals, like I'm more than happy to share my experience and perspective from where I sit and the fact that, you know, I pay attention to these issues.
You know, if I were a student, I'm not interested then attending that. If it's not something that I can get information that is going to be board's opinion, why should I waste my time? I have enough discussions on individual opinions, but if you're not gonna give me any information that would benefit me with my licensure or my studies or then why should I waste my time? I have enough of that. So I think even though it will save us to say it's our opinion, but it still needs to, that's why I said Mr. Hyde will have the answer. If we don't know the answer, you know, if it's not according to the board rules, then giving my opinion is not important. They have professors to give those opinions. They have each other to give opinions. We need to be able to educate them. This should be an educational session where it can help these candidates to earn their licensure or to have their continuing education done rightly or whatever, or to apply for the license or whatever they're seeking.
Well,
That's
we're taking
you know,
suggestions
my
for
opinion,
topics.
in this board, my opinion is just my opinion. You don't have to believe anything I say until I vote.
Okay, so Ms. Moore, you're gonna work on dates for us, correct?
Yes, I
Okay.
will work on dates. Are there any particular days of the week that do not work well for folks?
That far out, everything's just as bad or good as the other for me.
Okay.
I was just gonna say one other topic that might be useful down the road would be something on the jurisprudence and just getting some public discussion going around what the general public would like to see revised about the jurisprudence as we look at kind of opening that up again.
And Diane, the 9th and 10th are out for me. I won't be able to do the 9th or 10th of February if I'm going to be on it.
Thank you.
Okay, last item, recommendation. Does anyone have any requests for agenda items for the next board meeting? Hearing none, that is not your last call for that. Feel free to email me or Ms. Moore, anything specific that you'd like to see considered on the next agenda. Without anything else on my desk, without objection, I'm going to go ahead and adjourn the meeting.
Well,
Here-
if I don't see you again, all of you have a most wonderful, happy holidays.
And you as well,
You.
Dr.
You
Singh.
too.
Thank you.
You as well.
Good
Thank
to see
you.
everyone.
All right,
Bye,
without
everybody.
objection,
Bye,
meeting adjourned.
Everybody.
Thank you.
Thank you, everybody.
Bye, everybody.
Take it easy.